They had the fame, the talent, and all eyes on them. But off camera? They were absolute disasters. Behind the glitz and glamour were explosive tempers, sabotage on set, and egos too big for any stage. These weren't just difficult celebrities, they were full-blown Hollywood hurricanes, leaving chaos wherever they went. What happens when unchecked power meets zero self-control under the industry's brightest spotlight? Some screamed, some disappeared, and others burned bridges so badly no one dared follow. Buckle up, this countdown dives into the most toxic, out-of-control stars ever to shake up Tinseltown. And trust us, you won't believe who makes it to the end. Marlon Brando didn't just act, he detonated every rule Hollywood thought it understood. He was a once-in-a-generation genius, but with that brilliance came a storm no one could contain, an ego that devoured scripts, a temper that bent productions to his will, and a chaos that left even legends trembling. When Brando arrived on the set of Apocalypse Now, he was unrecognizable, bloated, unread, and completely unprepared. Director Francis Ford Coppola had hoped for a masterclass in performance. Instead, he got a slow-moving disaster. Brando hadn't read the script. He refused to learn his lines. He'd gained so much weight the entire film had to be restructured just to hide his body in shadows. Coppola later admitted, Brando nearly sank the film. He was a nightmare. Brando demanded his lines be fed through an earpiece so he wouldn't have to memorize anything. He improvised scenes, rewrote dialogue mid-shot, and turned every filming day into a gamble. Yes, the camera still loved him, but behind it, crews were breaking down. Producers dreaded him. Directors feared him. Colleagues either worshipped or hated him. There was no in-between. This wasn't new. By the 1970s, Brando's raw talent was constantly overshadowed by tales of him hijacking sets, clashing with directors, and emotionally wrecking those around him. He didn't bend the rules, he shattered them. And everyone had to either adjust or risk losing everything. Even in The Godfather, his most iconic role, he stirred madness. At his audition, he shoved cotton balls in his cheeks to create Don Corleone's voice. Later, on set, he refused to memorize lines, scribbling them on cue cards hidden around the room. No one dared stop him. Because he was Brando. And Brando meant magic, even if it came wrapped in mayhem. His genius earned him immortality. But it also gave him a dangerous kind of freedom, the kind that let him destroy without ever cleaning up the wreckage. Today, he's remembered as one of the greatest to ever grace the screen, and one of the most impossible to work with. He didn't just leave behind a legacy. He left behind a warning. And speaking of warnings, our next story is about a Hollywood woman whose darkness didn't just haunt her, it crawled straight into her children's nightmares. Joan Crawford. If Marlon Brando destroyed sets, Joan Crawford destroyed lives. She was the picture of Hollywood glamour, poised, powerful, untouchable. But beneath the pearls and perfect posture was a woman fueled by rage, obsession, and an iron will that crushed everything in her path. On screen, she was the embodiment of elegance. Off screen, a storm no one wanted to cross. Crawford didn't just demand respect, she commanded it with fear. Her control issues were infamous. She demanded spotless sets, flawless eyebrows, and absolute obedience. Assistants were fired for the slightest mistake. Directors were humiliated. Makeup artists feared a crooked lash. One insider once said, "She didn't act like a star, she acted like a five-star general." But the darkest stories lived behind closed doors. Her adopted daughter, Christina, shattered the Hollywood illusion with her explosive memoir Mommy Dearest. In it, Joan was exposed as a violent alcoholic who ruled her household with beatings, mind games, and screaming matches. The line, "No wire hangers, ever," became a pop culture punchline. But for Christina, it was a cry from a childhood spent in terror. Even before the book, the rumors were there. Whispers of cruelty, impossible standards, and endless feuds. She clashed brutally with Bette Davis in one of Tinseltown's most iconic rivalries. Joan had charm, yes, but it cut like a knife. Despite the chaos, her star never stopped shining. But when the glitter settled, what remained was a chilling legacy, the cautionary tale of a woman consumed by her need for control. And speaking of feuds, the next legend didn't just fight them, she lived for them. Bette Davis didn't just make enemies, she wore them like trophies. With eyes that could cut glass and a tongue sharper than any script, Davis wasn't just an actress, she was a force of nature. She once famously said, "Until you're known in my profession as a monster, you're not a star," and she lived by that creed. Relentless, unapologetic, and terrifyingly brilliant, Bette didn't ask for respect. She demanded it, clawed it out of Hollywood's hands, and dared anyone to challenge her reign. Her decades-long feud with Joan Crawford is the stuff of legend. The two icons didn't just exchange barbs, they waged psychological warfare. On the set of Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, Davis had a Coke machine installed just to spite Crawford, a board member at Pepsi. Crawford hit back by secretly loading her costume with weights, so Davis would injure her back during a scene. It was petty, it was vicious, and it was pure, unfiltered Hollywood drama. But Joan wasn't her only casualty. Davis went toe-to-toe with producers, directors, and leading men alike. She rewrote lines mid-shoot, walked off sets without warning, and refused to accept anything less than the best roles, even if it meant going to war for them. Some admired her grit. Others feared her fury. Everyone remembered her. Beneath the talent was a tempest. She burned bridges, twisted arms, and mastered the art of manipulation, on screen and off. But in a town built to break strong women, Bette Davis didn't just survive. She carved out a throne with her bare hands and dared anyone to knock her off it. Her legacy? Unruly, unforgettable, and undeniably powerful. She didn't play by the rules, she rewrote them. And if Davis wielded words like weapons, then our next star preferred something more blunt. His fists. Frank Sinatra. A voice like velvet, a temper like fire. He wasn't just a singer, he was the voice. The chairman of the board. The man who crooned his way into history books and cursed his way through Hollywood. Frank Sinatra's vocals could melt hearts, but his rage could freeze a room. Behind the charm, the tux, and the Rat Pack cool was a man known as much for his brutal temper as for his golden pipes. Rumors swirled about his mob connections, and Frank never denied them. He liked the fear. One producer once said, "If Frank didn't like you, your career was over. If he hated you, you feared for more than just your job." On set, he called the shots. He showed up when he pleased, refused retakes, and if the vibe didn't suit him, he'd walk off without a word. No threats. Just silence, and gone. The press? They suffered the worst. Photographers were shoved. Cameras smashed. Questions about his ex-wife met with fists, not answers. At one press event, he reportedly attacked a journalist just for probing too deep. And yet, America adored him. He was a king with friends in high places, from the Oval Office to the back rooms of Vegas. Sinatra was untouchable, even when his demons ran the show. His voice remains eternal. But behind the microphone, behind the spotlight, lived a man who ruled with intimidation, not affection. His legacy may echo in love songs, but his rage still whispers behind the curtain. Next up, a tortured genius whose brilliance burned everyone in its path, Orson Welles. The boy genius who lit up Hollywood and then torched every bridge on his way out. At just 25, he gave the world Citizen Kane, a cinematic masterpiece that redefined filmmaking. But with genius came an ego just as colossal. Welles didn't just direct, he dominated. He rewrote scripts without asking, clashed with editors, and hijacked productions even when he wasn't in charge. He once joked, "I started at the top and worked my way down." Sadly, it wasn't a joke, it was prophecy. Studios quickly grew tired of his defiance. He missed deadlines, blew through budgets, and refused to play by anyone's rules. Time and time again he was fired from his own films, only to publicly trash the people who took over. Actors respected his brilliance but feared his moods. One actress famously described him as a genius wrapped in a tantrum. By the 1950s, Hollywood had had enough. Welles became unhireable, a legend too difficult to handle. He drifted to Europe, took odd jobs, lent his voice to commercials, and watched from afar as the industry he once ruled carried on without him. His name remained iconic, but more for the promise of what could have been than for the body of work he left behind. His life became a cautionary tale. Brilliance means nothing if you can't stop burning every bridge you cross. And speaking of fire, our next name didn't just light up the room. She was pure dynamite in heels. Ava Gardner. The most dangerous beauty old Hollywood ever dared to love. When you talk about glamour with grit, chaos wrapped in silk, no name crashes harder into the conversation than Ava Gardner. She wasn't just one of the most breathtaking faces of the silver screen. She was a wildfire in heels. Directors didn't fear her beauty. They feared the roulette of Ava. Would she show up radiant and ready? Or half drunk, late, or not at all? She played by no one's rules but her own. One crew member put it best: Ava didn't just bend the schedule, she set it on fire. She'd stumble onto set still buzzed from the night before, mumble through one sultry take, then saunter off with a shrug. "That's enough for today, darling." She cursed out directors, embarrassed assistants in front of top brass, and dared any man, no matter how powerful, to tell her what to do. Hollywood covered her tracks as long as they could. She was box office gold and tabloid royalty. Studio execs spun tales of exhaustion and creative differences, but everyone inside the system knew Ava was a beautiful storm you couldn't predict, only survive. And off camera? Even wilder. Her marriages to Mickey Rooney and Frank Sinatra were tabloid carnage, explosive fights, scandalous affairs, and bruised egos thrown like ashtrays. Once, in a fury, she hurled a champagne bottle at Sinatra's head and didn't miss. Yet somehow, the camera never stopped loving her. Neither did audiences. Producers built entire productions around her chaos, bending time and budget just to keep her from blowing it all apart. Because when she was on, she was untouchable. A goddess. A spell no lens could resist. Ava Gardner wasn't just a star, she was a beautiful warning. A reminder that behind the velvet curtain of fame often lives a woman burning too brightly to follow the script. And while Ava shattered rules with style and defiance, our next name shattered himself and everyone around him with him. Montgomery Clift was once hailed as the next Brando, maybe even better. With his tender voice, piercing gaze, and a vulnerability that melted through the screen, directors wept watching him work. But behind the brilliance was a man unraveling, slowly, painfully, and dragging everyone around him into the wreckage. Monty was difficult even before the crash. He'd storm off set mid-scene if a line didn't feel honest. He challenged directors over a single word, leaving co-stars in awe one moment and emotionally drained the next. His talent was undeniable, but so was the storm inside him. Then came the turning point, 1956. After leaving Elizabeth Taylor's home, Clift slammed his car into a telephone pole. His face was shattered, his spirit splintered. When he came back to set, he wasn't the same. He was medicated, paranoid, and fragile. He forgot lines, hid in trailers, and sometimes dissolved into tears in the middle of takes. Some days he was brilliant. Other days he was gone, buried in pills and silence. One director put it bluntly, "You couldn't direct Monty anymore. You could only wait." His colleagues tried to help, but even they admitted the emotional toll. His relationships were a whirlwind, intense, guilt-ridden, filled with apologies that couldn't undo the damage. One actress recalled, he'd cry between scenes, then vanish for hours. Monty's career limped forward, still capable of greatness, but haunted by the man he used to be. Hollywood had no idea how to save him, and no patience to try. His downfall didn't just become a tragedy, it became legend. But for those who stood beside him, it wasn't just sad. It was exhausting. And while Monty's demons tore him apart in silence, the next star made sure the whole world heard hers. Tallulah Bankhead. Before Madonna shocked the world or Gaga redefined the stage, there was Tallulah, and she didn't give a damn what anyone thought. She was chaos wrapped in glamour, a walking scandal who lit up every room with audacity and alcohol on her breath. Outrageous? Absolutely. Unfiltered? Boys. Predictable? Never. Tallulah wasn't just ahead of her time, she bulldozed through it, leaving smoke and shattered norms in her wake. She drank on set, openly, proudly, and delivered her lines with a slur and a smirk. When asked about her reckless ways, she famously snapped, "It's the good girls who keep diaries. The bad girls never have the time." And Tallulah never had time. Not for rules. Not for shame. She flirted with everyone, men, women, married, single, it didn't matter. She made desire look fearless in an era obsessed with silence and secrets. Directors begged her to behave. Studios tried to contain her. But she was a storm they couldn't bottle. She'd go off-script mid-scene, scream profanities, or stroll off-set if she got bored. Once, she halted a shoot just to purr, "Darlings, does anyone have a drink and a cigarette? I'm positively parched." That was Tallulah, but defiant, unapologetically alive. She sparred with censors during the suffocating Hays Code era, mocking them to their faces and daring them to shut her down. And yet, she kept getting cast, not because she was easy, but because no one else could touch her brilliance. Eventually, though, Hollywood grew tired of her defiance. Roles disappeared. Producers labeled her a liability. But even then, she didn't flinch. She didn't leave behind trophies or sanitized headlines. She left behind fire. A rebel spirit, untamed and unforgettable, before rebellion became just another trend. Tallulah didn't break the mold, she crushed it under her heel and lit a match. And if Tallulah scorched reputations, the next name on our list? They burned down entire sets with raw, unchecked madness. Howard Hughes wasn't just a movie mogul, he was a genius unraveling in real time, and everyone around him paid the price. He began as a visionary, chasing the skies with record-breaking planes and engineering marvels. But when he turned his gaze toward Hollywood, he didn't just want to make films, he wanted to control them like cockpits. When he directed Hell's Angels, he res-hot scenes endlessly, spent millions without blinking, and pushed stunt pilots to their limits. All for one perfect frame. But as time went on, Hughes's brilliance gave way to obsession. He became a man consumed by control, paranoia, and fear. He locked himself in pitch-black rooms for weeks, scrubbing through footage frame by frame, haunted by invisible germs and imagined betrayals. His OCD seeped into every inch of his empire, scripts rewritten dozens of times, actresses kept on strict contracts and watched like prisoners. Some weren't even allowed to speak to outsiders. Behind the scenes, crew members whispered stories of his terrifying surveillance. He didn't just monitor employees, he tracked lovers, interrogated friends, and made directors wait silently for hours only to cancel at the last second. Eventually, the cameras stopped rolling. The studios grew quiet. Hughes vanished into hotel suites and penthouses, shrouded in darkness, urinating in jars, letting the world rot from the other side of a locked door. But even in isolation, his grip on Hollywood didn't loosen. His ghost haunted studios, his methods echoed in boardrooms. Howard Hughes's story isn't just about madness or money, it's a chilling portrait of how unchecked power can warp reality itself. And if Hughes ruled with fear and paranoia, our next Hollywood tyrant hid something just as sinister, wrapped in charm, sex appeal, and a smile that fooled the world: Errol Flynn. Hollywood's golden rogue with a shadow darker than any role he ever played. To the world, he was the swashbuckling hero, charming, fearless, forever in tights with a smirk and a sword. But when the cameras stopped rolling, a much more troubling man emerged. In the 1940s, Flynn faced charges of statutory rape from 2 teenage girls, a trial that gripped the nation. Though he was acquitted, the stain never faded. Some said it was trial by celebrity. Others believed he walked free simply because fame outweighed justice. Behind the scenes, the truth was no less disturbing. Flynn was a man of excess, booze before breakfast, belligerent outbursts on set, and a cruelty masked by charisma. He belittled crew members, brawled with directors, and often stumbled into scenes too drunk to stand. For his female co-stars, working with him wasn't a dream, it was survival. One actress put it plainly: "He didn't see you. Just your body, just the kiss." Still, he played the press like a fiddle. The public ate up his bad boy persona, turning his recklessness into legend. In Like Flynn became a catchphrase, a joke born from uncomfortable truths the industry refused to confront. He died at just 50, bloated, broken, a ghost of the icon he once was. But the wreckage he left behind didn't die with him. His films still play on screens, but now there's a question that lingers louder than ever. Who knew and chose to stay silent? Coming up next, we dive into the modern stars who brought bad behavior into the age of constant exposure, where every outburst, every fist, every scandal played out live and unfiltered for the world to see. Sean Penn, the Oscar winner with fists of fury and a tux always ready. Few actors could win an Academy Award one day and make headlines for punching a photographer the next, yet somehow still stroll into the next red carpet like nothing happened. Sean Penn rose to fame in the 80s and 90s with a raw, smoldering presence that made him one of Hollywood's most respected actors. But behind the accolades was a man known for a volcanic temper that kept even his closest allies at arm's length. His rap sheet of run-ins with the paparazzi reads like a bar fight playlist. He's been arrested for assaults, once allegedly dangled a photographer over a hotel balcony, and even reportedly threw a rock at another. When asked about it, Penn didn't flinch. "I don't have a fear of physical confrontation," he said with a shrug. And no one doubted it. His infamous marriage to Madonna in the late 80s turned into a media firestorm. Rumors of violent outbursts and controlling behavior swirled, including a disturbing story where he allegedly tied her to a chair during a fight. Though Madonna later denied the most extreme allegations, by then, the damage to Penn's public image had already been carved in stone. Even as he evolved into a humanitarian and outspoken activist in the 2000s, the rage never fully left. At press conferences, he'd snap at reporters, walk out mid-question, or glare until the room fell silent. One journalist put it best: "You don't interview Sean Penn. You survive him." Yet somehow the roles kept coming. Because in Hollywood, brilliance buys forgiveness. But legacy? That's harder to clean up. Today, Penn is both revered and feared, an icon wrapped in contradictions. And speaking of contradictions, the next man smiled for the cameras, while quietly pulling every string in the room. Tom Cruise, the smile that hit a storm. Tom Cruise might have the most iconic smile in Hollywood, but behind that dazzling grin lies a level of control that few outside the industry ever truly understood. In the 90s and early 2000s, Cruise was untouchable, a box office juggernaut with hits like Top Gun, Mission, Impossible, and Jerry Maguire. Everything he touched turned into gold. But as the spotlight grew hotter, so did the questions about who Tom Cruise really was. It wasn't just the infamous Oprah couch jump, though that viral leap of love for Katie Holmes cracked his polished image. It was everything that followed. His interviews became intense, even combative. On live TV, he slammed psychiatry and lectured Matt Lauer with the chilling line, "You don't know the history of psychiatry. I do." That wasn't energy. That was control. Behind the scenes, Cruise's obsession with perfection became legendary. He reportedly clashed with directors and producers, pushed for script changes that aligned with his personal beliefs, and ran interviews, premieres, and media appearances like military operations. On the Mission, Impossible sets, he was known to micromanage everything, from lighting angles to coffee temperature. If the espresso's off, one crew member said, "He'll notice, and he'll say something." His work ethic? Unmatched. His focus? Unrelenting. But co-stars often whispered the same truth. Working with Tom Cruise meant working for Tom Cruise. Unlike some stars who spiraled and crashed, Cruise stayed at the top. But the cracks in his carefully managed image told another story, one of obsession, ideology, and an unshakable need to control every frame, every word, every second. And if Tom Cruise ruled every room he entered, the next name on our list didn't just walk in. She owned the room and made sure everyone knew it. Sharon Stone. The Ice Queen of Hollywood, both on screen and off. When Sharon Stone uncrossed her legs in Basic Instinct, she became an instant legend. That moment burned itself into pop culture, but the woman behind it was no less fiery. Stunning, brilliant, and fiercely ambitious, Stone didn't just act like she was in control, she demanded it. And that came with a price. Behind the scenes, whispers grew louder. Working with Sharon was like handling a diamond, flawless, but razor-sharp. Directors said she didn't want direction, only validation. She'd rewrite scenes, argue over lighting, and show up hours late because she didn't feel the vibe. One producer put it bluntly, Sharon doesn't collaborate. Sharon commands. Crew members recalled cold stares, biting sarcasm, and an attitude that bordered on cruel, especially toward those she didn't see as equals. Journalists on press tours weren't spared either. Interviews often ended early, especially if the questions weren't drenched in flattery. She didn't smile for the press, she sized them up. Stone claimed she was punished for being an intelligent, outspoken woman in an industry that preferred its actresses beautiful and obedient. Maybe they just didn't like smart women, she once said. And maybe there's truth in that. But intelligence alone didn't explain the sharp tongue, the dismissed assistants, or her refusal to reshoot scenes because a co-star didn't look camera-ready. Eventually, Hollywood had enough. The calls slowed, the script stopped coming, and directors moved on to actresses who didn't come with demands and daggers. Her star faded, but the stories never did. In recent years, she's spoken out, saying she was misunderstood. And maybe she was. Or maybe Sharon Stone was exactly what she always claimed to be, someone who refused to be handled, even if it meant being hated. She didn't just want the spotlight. She wanted to control the entire set. And speaking of control, the next actor didn't just want to be part of the story, he wanted to rewrite the whole thing. Edward Norton, a genius who couldn't let go. He doesn't shout. He doesn't throw tantrums. But ask any director who's worked with Edward Norton, and you'll hear the same quiet warning. He just doesn't know when to stop. From the outside, Norton is a force of brilliance. His roles in American History X, Fight Club, and Primal Fear cemented his status as one of the sharpest actors of his time. But behind the scenes, he had a reputation no award could cover. The actor who wanted to be everything: star, writer, editor, and director, even if no one asked him to. Things came to a head during The Incredible Hulk. Norton reportedly rewrote massive portions of the script, clashed with Marvel over creative control, and when denied final cut privileges, he simply refused to promote the film. Marvel didn't argue, they just replaced him with Mark Ruffalo and moved on like he was never there. And that wasn't an isolated incident. On indie sets, Norton demanded script rewrites, micromanaged editing rooms, and left exhausted crews scrambling to meet his ever-shifting standards. One producer summed it up best: he's not difficult because he's mean. He's difficult because he thinks he's always right. It wasn't ego. Not exactly. It was perfectionism turned into a wrecking ball. An obsession with craft so intense it suffocated the very art he tried to protect. Norton eventually retreated into passion projects, where he could control every frame. And to be fair, some of them were stunning. But Hollywood doesn't just reward vision, it runs on collaboration. And Edward Norton? He never quite learned how to play well with others. While Norton was consumed by control, the final name on our list faced a different problem entirely. She couldn't control herself at all. Cameron Diaz. America's golden girl with a shadow no one saw coming. To the world, she was the radiant girl next door, effortlessly cool, always smiling, the star who lit up every screen she touched. The Mask. Charlie's Angels. There's something about Mary. In the late 90s and early 2000s, Cameron Diaz was everywhere, a triple threat with charm, beauty, and comic brilliance. But behind the sunshine was a storm few dared to speak of. Off-camera, Diaz reportedly had a temper as sharp as her cheekbones. Red carpet photographers braced themselves. She was known to snap at reporters, flip the bird at cameras, and shut down interviews the moment a question rubbed her the wrong way. As one paparazzo put it, she smiles for the fans, but the second that flash goes off, the real Cameron comes out. Behind the scenes, things weren't any smoother. On set, she often clashed with co-stars, especially in ensemble comedies where the spotlight had to be shared. From arguments over screen time to refusing to follow a director's vision, Cameron wanted things her way or no way at all. "That's not how I see the character," she'd say, and she wouldn't budge. Eventually, she disappeared from Hollywood's fast lane. Officially, it was to pursue a simpler life. But insiders whispered it was more than that, a quiet retreat from the chaos, the tension, and maybe even the trail of fractured relationships left behind. She's since re-emerged in wellness ventures and lifestyle projects, but that glossy, America's sweetheart image? It's never quite returned. Because in Hollywood, even the brightest smiles can hide the darkest reputations. And there you have it, 20 stars whose bad behavior broke the mold. If this video surprised, entertained, or made you see your favorites in a new light, don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell us in the comments, which star shocked you the most? Stay tuned for more raw Hollywood truths.